having money in a family can very easily become oppressive, I think. I mean, I've seen so many situations, like there's a family I know in Naples, Italy, because I used to own a business there that's now in bankruptcy. But but they have, I'll just call it like a compound, and the whole family lives there, and multiple generations all live there. And I mean, on one hand, they all know that they have a place to live, which is good, but I, I'm not sure that they're all free to really become, the best versions of themselves.
Brandon Ducharme is an investment advisor representative of and offers investment advisory services through SCF Investment Advisors Incorporated, an SEC-registered investment advisor, 10150 Meanly Drive, first floor, San Diego, California, 92131, 800-955-2517, www.scfsecurities.com. SCF Investment Advisors Incorporated and Ducharme Wealth Management are separate entities. The information in this podcast is current at the time of recording. It is based upon sources and data believed to be accurate and reliable. The information, opinions, and forward-looking statements expressed herein are subject to change without notice. Moreover, all comments and opinions voiced herein are for informational and entertainment purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations and should not be interpreted as such. Further, the opinions expressed are Brandon Ducharme's and his guests and do not reflect the views and opinions of SCF Investment Advisors or any of its affiliates. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. No strategy assures success or protects against loss. To determine what is appropriate for you, consult your financial professional. This information is not intended to be a substitute for specific individualized tax or legal advice. Ducharme Wealth Management and SCF Investment Advisors do not provide legal or tax advice. These services are provided by separate entities. The guest speakers featured in this podcast are not affiliated with SCF Investment Advisors, nor are they affiliated with Ducharme Wealth Management unless otherwise indicated.
I mean, I've noticed a spike in people calling about protecting their assets, or talking about saving gold, precious metals, and different things like that. So there's been a spike with that. Not saying that's a good thing or whatever, but just that's a whole other podcast. I'm probably not the expert for that either, but
you know what? I do have a question about that.
Sure.
I haven't seen something play out nasty enough yet where there was like nefarious parties involved, but I've thought about this, so everyone says, I want to hold gold and silver. I want to hold gold and silver. And as an investment guy, I really encourage people to try to think through that more. If it's purely an inflation hedge you're going to own forever and ever, it's
right.
I mean, it's better than cash, but you're not going to get a return on investment. You're just going to get an inflation adjustment, right? If that's your whole thesis anyway.
Right.
So it's destined to underperform. However, from your vantage point as an estate attorney, what is to stop? So if you have, if grandpa has, a bunch of gold coins, because that's what he felt good about. How does a family protect and make sure that that gets passed to the next generation and it doesn't, what I'm going to just say, go missing?
Yep. I've seen it work once, and it involved a heavily litigated, twice. And they both involved heavily litigated cases. Everyone had their own lawyers representing them. And like the multiple people and their lawyers all went to the safe to, videotape the contents and, count the coins or the gold bricks or whatever it was. And, then there was a negotiation or, some kind of figuring out about who would get what or whatever. Most of the time, you're right. There's what do you call it? Gossip in the family, or, kind of people heard things in the family that so-and-so had gold in a safe, but then, it's not there. So what happened to it? And no one knows. And, there's one of the great things about it is there's no way to trace it. And I think that's one of the reasons people are so in love with it. Like the government's not going to be able to know, know what happened to it. But yeah, it definitely is. It's more tricky for sure than things that are traceable, like bank accounts and real estate and whatnot. So, and then the other thing, just from this isn't really a legal issue, but George Gammon has a podcast, and he was talking about, or he actually went, he did a Plan B tour. So he went to, I forget, Venezuela and different other places, and he took gold coins with him, and the whole theory was, he should be able to trade these gold coins for money and be able to, stay at hotels and eat at restaurants and all that stuff. Yeah, he couldn't get rid of the gold. Like the gold dealers, no one else wanted the gold, and the gold dealers, they wanted to get the gold, or they wanted to sell gold and get cash, because to them cash was more valuable than the gold. And so the last thing they wanted was
More
gold, actually. Yeah. So I think he ended up actually selling a Rolex watch so that he could stay at a hotel and eat at a restaurant.
Really?
Yeah.
It's so interesting where people have the idea of safety around it. But it's kind of like the TSA. It's this illusion of safety. Because at the end of the day, once you could actually transact in it, it's, it's just not the medium of transaction for most people. And at the end of the day, the dollar is the reserve currency of the world. And I bet all those countries that you would think, oh man, they want gold.
They wanted dollars.
They want dollars. That's what they really want. And so in the US, we get kind of mad at the government for printing more money and inflation and all this stuff. But, if you actually run comparison to other countries, like you kind of ought to just be a little bit grateful almost, and then just decide you got to play the game. I'm not saying be grateful that the government is irresponsible. Like on a moral and ethical level, I wish the government didn't do any of this stuff. However, they do. And I used to share an office wall with a guy, and he would say, you can show up and you can be mad about it, or you can decide to not show up, but life is a game, and either way you're going to play it. So you might as well try to play to win. But I think that's all. This is all going on a tangent to our conversation, which I appreciate you graciously allowing here. I am interested though in the wealth transfer, right? That is what I help people with. Sometimes it's on the accumulation side, sometimes it's in the distribution side during their lifetime, and sometimes it's the distribution as part of a wealth transfer, right?
Yeah.
Now there's multiple components to that, in my opinion, right? There's the investment side and the financial planning side to do all the right things there. But then there's also the legal framework to all of this. And I've done other podcasts and talked with other people, right? There's what I call your basic estate plan, right? Revocable trust, a pour over will, your power of attorneys, advanced healthcare directive, and, deed of trust, getting real estate into the trust. And for a lot of people, those documents are sufficient. But I think one of the unique things about your story is that there is the legal framework, but then how do you follow up on that legal framework to really make it work out the right way and get the intended results?
Yeah. So are we starting the podcast, or is it on now? Or
yeah, we're going.
Oh, we're going.
Yeah.
Okay. 3, 2, 1, go.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yes, it is interesting. And here, let me just tell my story super fast.
Okay.
So, I was raised as Paul Deloughery, and I had a wonderful father, wonderful childhood, wonderful mom. I just remember having a house overlooking the golf course in Winona, Minnesota, and I was an Eagle Scout and had a great time in high school, and then when I just turned 16, my dad died, and that was very traumatic for me. And we had financial troubles because we had my parents had leveraged their house in order to keep a couple of businesses going in the early 80s. And so basically after my dad died, we ended up losing the house and losing, basically being in pretty bad financial trouble. And then I went to college, and I watched my mom work. I mean, actually, she worked 2 full-time jobs and just really worked hard to, kind of get on top of things and avoid bankruptcy and all of that stuff. And the whole time I was mourning after my father. I mean, I just, I wanted to have that father figure. And then years later, got married and all this stuff. And then some relatives finally came out of the woodwork, and it came out that someone that I think it was actually my stepsister who said, "Oh, you don't know your real dad yet." Like, what? I was 35 years old at the time. And so that was a little bit of a shock. And because my stepdad had died, like I said, when I was 16. So I'd gone for quite a while, 2 decades almost, having one story in my mind. And I was raised, with an Irish last name and thinking I was Irish and German. And I learned bagpipes and I did Irish dancing. I was in Michael Flatley's dance school, river dance.
Yeah.
I actually took lessons from him and all this stuff. And then come to find out I'm German, period. Okay. And so there's a little tension between me and my mom because she had kept this from me, and enough time has gone by now that I forgive her. I understand. She was from her generation, and they dealt with things a different way back then and all that stuff. Not to say that it was any easier for me, but it then fast forward to, let's see, 2017, my mom died. And literally one of the last things she said to me was, "Paul, there's something important I need to tell you." And I said, "Oh, Mom, that's fine. Let's talk about it tomorrow." And that was that. There was something important that she needed to tell me. So I have that memory. I never found out what it was. And then a couple years after that, I got a call from Uncle Dave, who was my biological father's brother. And he said, "Oh, yeah." He had a Delaware accent. I can't pretend to do it, but, Delaware drawl, country drawl. And he said, "Yeah, your dad wants to see you." And like, oh, okay. I mean, talking about him as dad when I only saw him maybe as an infant. And that was about it. And then, anyway, long story short, I ended up seeing him. He was in a nursing home. He ended up dying 6 weeks later. And around that same time, I found out that he had a $28 million estate. He had actually invested his military retirement in penny stocks, and that's all he did. He was obsessed with it. And I'm not saying, I'm not sure if he was a financial genius, but, if you do it, even if an average person focuses on something enough, they'll be better than other people who don't focus on it. And so, he obviously was very good. He died. I saw the money as a sick consolation prize because I actually the whole time, I just wanted a father figure in my life. And so, all of a sudden I had $28 million in my TD Ameritrade account, and or worth of stocks. And anyway, half of that ended up going to federal estate taxes, and then I was trying to figure out, just without any background, without any preparation or anything, trying to figure out what to do with it. And I thought, I figured, well, shoot, I'm an attorney. I do estate planning, and I'll be able to figure this out really fast. So, I had kind of the assumption that I'd be able to learn about investing, just like that, just really fast.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't turn out to be that easy. And I went to an investment conference and met some people who, just called a spade a spade. They were basically con artists. Or scammers. They didn't really have viable business plans. Looking back on it now, but it sure sounded good to me at the time, and they promised big returns, and shoot, and they were so confident with it. So how could I go wrong, right? Anyway, I lost almost all of it. I'm still waiting. I have money tied up in a business in southern Italy. If you can, I'm skipping some of the steps here, but you can kind of imagine some of the crazy decisions that went from me having money safely in a TD Ameritrade investments to being involved in a failing business in southern Italy. So,
wow.
And that's still tied up in bankruptcy, and I'm supposed to get some of that back. So I'm still waiting for that, but that's still a process. But that's 12, 13 years later, and I'm still trying to get some of the money back. But basically, I ended up losing it all. Or almost all of it. And the reason, and I've done a lot of soul searching about this. The reason is I just didn't have the background. And so the simple explanation is, my dad didn't have father. My biological father didn't have a will. Okay, well, if he would have had a will, that would have said the same thing that state law said, which is that I get everything. That wouldn't have really moved the needle very much.
Mm-hmm.
I still would have ended up with all the money in my account with no explanation, no background, no training, no safety bumpers to keep me from making bad decisions or anything. And I have in the meanwhile seen other families that have been more successful with it, and there are traits that they have, and it's basically is there just has to be some kind of a common understanding. And here, let's if you will allow me to venture, and I'm not going to get hyper political here. I'm just going to, I'll keep this kind of plain and neutral so that
Sure.
none of your listeners will get offended.
Okay.
But from a political standpoint, here in this country, if you just think about where things are at, we started over 250 years ago with common understandings, and there were common values and common aspirations and common ideas about people's place in society. And the assumption was that actually more of the assumption was that everyone had responsibilities, and less so. I think if you look back a couple hundred years ago, obviously there was discussion about people's rights. Okay, we have the Bill of Rights, and you have the right to life, liberty, and what got changed to pursuit of happiness. And there's a whole background to why it was happiness and not property, because really, historically, it should have been the right to property, because that's what undergirds freedom in any society. But everyone understood that they also have counterbalancing responsibilities, and that was in society, that was within the family, and all of that stuff. And that has slowly just eroded and we could do a whole series about what caused that or whatever, but I think everyone has agreed or can agree that has eroded over the years, and now we don't have common aspirations as a society. We don't have common values, and we actually don't even have common understandings of right and wrong. And so what's the sole thing that's holding our society together right now is the law. And there's a good portion of our population that's not trying to pick away at it. I mean, they're trying to dynamite that. They want to get rid of that and just have chaos, because apparently that's going to be better than this, the horrible prosperity and peace that we had in the past. We don't want that. And in the that reflects itself in the families too. And it's I wrote a book. It's called Lasting Wealth. It's on Amazon. Yeah. And looking back on it, I think I was naive when I even wrote that book. And if I was to, I'm not sure I would even write a book now, because I honestly don't even know what I would say. Like, what's the secret to successfully passing, wealth, or whatever you've accumulated? What's the secret to doing that successfully? I will say that there are some general principles, and you have to have some kind of common values in the family, and common understandings. In my book, I call it family code of honor. And it sounds, it's a very pompous, wonderful sounding term, but some kind of common rules about, and every family has to do their own. There's, but there has to be some kind of common rules.
If everyone has their own, but can you give like an example of what?
Sure.
Yep. Give an example of one or two things that like might be in somebody's code of honor. Don't go to bed angry.
Okay. Don't fall asleep if you still have a conflict. Like, and some kind of variation of the family sticks together. I mean, that's always been part of my family. And the expression was, blood is thicker than water. And now I have to explain this, because there's, the footnote to that is probably volumes long, because, blood is thicker than water could be used to justify, sexual abuse in the family and keeping that private. Obviously that's not what I'm talking about. I don't think that's healthy. And I have, there's some dark stuff in my family that I won't go into. I think I did a couple of YouTube videos about it, but, and I won't go into it here, but, family secrets are not good. I think just in general. So never need, no family member gets left behind is a good one. And maybe one more would just be, never abandon a family member in need. And I mean, we've dealt with that in different ways in my family. I guess I don't want to get into it too much, but I have a son and a daughter. My son is 20. My daughter is soon to be 22, and they've had their own issues. Like I guess a lot of young people do these days. I'm not going to get into it, but I mean the one thing is we're not going to abandon each other, and if any of us has a need, whatever that is. I think that's really good, and I think that would serve any family or any family well. And I'm kind of thinking even big picture here, because go ahead. I keep babbling.
I think it's really interesting and noteworthy that your examples, none of them are we believe everyone should buy a home as soon as they're 18, or, we believe that people shouldn't carry credit card debts, or we believe that people should, max fund their 401k. Like, none of them are about your money decisions from a, like, more of a quantitative standpoint. They're qualitative. It's like behavioral personality, like who you are, not what you do, right? Like, you are a family that sticks together. You're not saying these are the steps for success that we follow in this family, right? We buy value stocks or something and, pass it on. And that's how our wealth is protected. You're saying what you found to be successful, if I'm understanding you correctly, is the wealth transfer becomes most effective when families have a clear guiding principle amongst themselves of who they are and what they should be doing as human beings, right? And then when they are clear on that and they're clear on their values, then the clarity on what to do with the money is probably easier to deal with.
Yeah.
Am I understanding what kind of, is that?
No, I think you're right. And it's really funny. I mean, the older I get, the seems like the less I know or something, or the less,
like, it's the older we get, the more we know.
Sure of myself I am.
So it's the older we get, the more we know that we don't know,
Yeah. Well, we're all in this journey. We all have our own path, and the family as a unit can't really dictate that. There can be within, I think within the, boy, it gets difficult. I mean, having money in a family can very easily become oppressive, I think. I mean, I've seen so many situations, like there's a family I know in Naples, Italy, because I used to own a business there that's now in bankruptcy. but they have, I'll just call it like a compound, and the whole family lives there, and multiple generations all live there. And I mean, on one hand, they all know that they have a place to live, which is good, but I'm not sure that they're all free to really become, the best versions of themselves. So there's a give and a take there, I guess.
Yeah.
And, even in the past, like with going back to the, pre-industrial revolution age, families used to have their own business, and the children, grew up working in the business, and it just naturally got passed down, as being a farmer or whatever it was. And, it certainly was easier because people knew what they were doing. They got trained, and, didn't, that made things easier, but it also, I guess, in a way, kind of limited their choices. On the other hand, now we have the tyranny of too many choices. I'll say, like, everyone can become anything they want, and therefore, it seems like it's really hard for people to make decisions. Well, that on top of, I don't know, there's all kinds of other social stuff going on, and having it be hard to buy houses being unaffordable for most people and all that. So, yeah, it makes it hard, but that, somehow it's important not to take away people's incentives. That money should never do that. Take away people's incentives. Jordan Peterson says we're meant to walk uphill, and I completely agree with that. Like, I've seen probably some of the worst situations I've seen in families are where there was a lot of money, and the kids inherited money, and they had a great, wonderful life with, expensive things and nice houses and vacations and all that stuff. And then they raised their kids, the third generation, kind of with the same, uh, um, advantages, and and then the money runs out. And now you have a third generation that has expensive tastes and not a very good work ethic and no money.
Yeah.
Like it actually would have been better just to have donated all the money to charity. And I, as an estate planning attorney, I'm not supposed to say that, but it just gets really difficult. But there are families, and I'll say typically they have a strong religious background. There's a pattern there. There are families that they just have it figured out, and they all have a work ethic, and they all just know that there's no expectation, that none of them have an expectation that life's going to be easy when mom and dad dies and all that kind of stuff. And they wouldn't want that. And they just typically have good communication. Well, so the key is good communication and trust in the family. They all have weekly, or like they all eat dinner together, or at a minimum get together once a week if it's at church or wherever, and afterwards for lunch. And that's kind of their tradition, and it serves them well. And the families that don't have something to take that place, I'm not saying it has to be religion, but I don't know what else it would be, honestly.
I think
so.
Well, I was raised in a pretty religious house, and one of the things that my dad always instilled kind of as a culture in our home was the idea of teach them correct principles and let them govern themselves. And as an adult, we got more and more freedom and latitude as teenagers, and then as young adults. And I left home like 2 weeks after high school and moved across the country, and was expected to make my own decisions. And we knew that we always had a place to kind of fall back to and stuff. But I took risks and went out on my own, and started building a life for myself. And I think had I been given a strict, you do this, you always do this, you do this, you do this, you do this, and if you don't do exactly as you're being told, you're going to be cut off from the family or whatever, right? Or we'll be disappointed in you. I never felt that way. I never really got that. And so could I have been further than I am in my career or financially or whatever than I am right now? Yeah, probably. I think if I had turned my entire financial life over to my dad at 18 and, got help with every penny and every decision I made, he probably could have helped me get further. But I wouldn't have learned the principles to be able to govern myself. And now as an adult that has, I have 2 kids of my own now, I have to, take the torch and carry that on. And without the understanding of how to manage myself and govern myself and my family, it would be really hard to then instill that in the next generation. Right. And so that's where, what I've heard it be called is nuevo riche, right? So there's this kind of this pattern historically of rags to riches to rags. And in Europe, particularly, and I believe in France, it's 3 generations of wealth. So until you get to the 3rd generation of wealth, you're kind of they just call you new rich. You're like, anyone can make some money, but that doesn't make you like wealthy. You're not a wealthy family, right? It's really that 3rd generation where, okay, are they going to be able to really act wealthy? And that's different than just becoming rich, and it's different character traits, it's different mindsets, it's different behavior, and decision-making abilities and emotional intelligence probably. And that is really hard, like you're saying. So it's interesting from your perspective where you're saying you'd be better off almost in the second generation, just give it to charity. I think it's almost that, what I've seen is, by the time people get the money and, they, go throughout their life and then they die and they pass it on. What's the average life expectancy now? People are living into their late 80s, 90s. Mm-hmm. They had kids in their early 20s. So you're giving a big chunk of money to someone that's in their late 60s, okay. And then they go and do nothing with it, take care of their own needs. And then they get, and they give it to pass it on to, their kids when their kids are in their mid to late 60s. Mm-hmm. It's this pattern of it's always too late to make a real meaningful difference. That like, which is why I'm a big fan of the wealth transfer before you hit the grave, and there's a way to put legal framework in, and there's a way to do the right planning to do that. And I think if I'm understanding what you're saying is correct, you'd almost want to use that wealth and deploy that wealth in a way that not just gives, but teaches. So that way you can, transfer that and see it be used appropriately and help with the guiding principles of what do you do with this as you get it, and how do you navigate these decisions in life, and how do you handle these things. Have you seen instances where families do that?
Where they
start the wealth transfer while they're still alive versus
while they're still alive. Yes. So I give the analogy in the introduction of my book of going kayaking in the ocean in California at Half Moon Bay. And this is quite a while ago. I would love to go again, but it was something else. So let me just, and I'm going somewhere with this story.
Okay.
So, what a kayak is. I mean, it's just, it's not that big. I don't know how long it is, 10 feet, 10, 11 feet long or something like that. And maybe even just 10. And you get in there, you put your legs out straight, and then you there's some straps, you put your knees in. Mm-hmm. So you're held together just by your knees in these straps and a seat, and then you have a paddle. And at Half Moon Bay, like the waves just keep coming back, and so you have to time yourself. So you get in the kayak, and then you just start paddling like heck to get past these waves. And my first attempt doing that, I tipped over, and I just remember seeing the jagged, what was it, broken coral or rocks or whatever, and it was like inches from my face. Like I'm lucky I still have a face, because it almost got ripped off there. And anyway, so I got back on. And then, paddle, and the waves keep coming back and all this. And then finally you get past that. And then it's just like rolling water. And well, there are other dangers there too, like sharks.
Yeah.
They're literally, literally, I guess there's a bunch of sharks. I didn't see any, thank goodness, when I was there, but then it actually gets kind of fun. And it's kind of like that with families. And I've noticed a pattern that, I mean, honestly, up to, and these figures need to probably get adjusted for inflation. But as of 10, 15 years ago, when I was thinking about this, it seemed like at $30 million, the family could first qualify for a multifamily office services. And that's where there was actually a kind of a plug and play service where there were programs to help teach the family about, values, and like, that was the culture. It was like, you finally, you got to this point, and you could, then network with other families who are at that point. And it was, the family wealth was viewed collectively. It wasn't mom and dad. Now it was the family's money, and the entire family was doing planning. And I did that for a family, about a year and a half ago. And I helped them actually implement a family code of honor and a constitution, basically ways, and some legal documents also, but over and above, the legal documents, like how they can make decisions about how to give money, how to give educational money to the third generation, and have it be equal, or have it be like fair and all of that stuff. And what if someone wants to go to cosmetic school and then someone else wants to be a doctor? I mean, is that fair, or do you equalize it somehow, or how do you deal with it, and all that, all those different issues? But for most of us who are not at the 30 million adjusted for inflation, whatever that amount is now, or it's a matter of judgment calls, and I think you do the best you can, and as much as you can approximate how those successful families operate, I think it's better. So you're right. I mean, the more the family can kind of deal with things as a unit rather than mom and dad, I think it's better, just in general. Meaning, like, even, well, the older generation, I mean, like, the World War II aged generation, their approach was do a will, hide it, and the kids will find it, when I'm dead. And, I don't want to talk about it. And, I would tell them, listen, you just disinherited your one daughter, that's going to be like a huge argument. I don't care. They'll work it out. But which is not a good idea. So the more, just from that simple example, the more you can just do the communication now, and talk about it, and why are you making this decision, and all that stuff. So you try to kind of smooth the transition. Okay. So again, smoothing out those waves, instead of, that's going to be another wave of, in that case, it'll be a wave of litigation that the family has to go through, just to transfer wealth. So that's not a good experience for everyone. That's not a good legacy to leave.
Yeah.
But, anyway, sorry, I got off on a tangent. I tend to.
No, I think that's really valuable insight. Family offices are cool. They do a lot. From a raw dollar standpoint, they're very expensive for that type of service, right? Which is why typically now for family offices, you're closer to $100 million. But that doesn't mean that you can't learn from what they're doing and implement it on a smaller scale, and try to effectively teach and coach and plan, and bring family members into discussions. Money should not be a taboo topic, in my opinion, right? And quite frankly, death shouldn't be either, right? There's, the old Ben Franklin saying, there's only two things in life that are certain. It's death and taxes. So at some point you're going to die, and at some point the kids are going to pay taxes on your money in some way, shape, or form. And if you have kind of conversations that you accept reality for what it is, and you coach and you train and you guide and you get the right help, and they know the right people, and the right resources are brought to the table. I've been in those conversations, and I've been in those conversations with other families. It's not a weird thing once it's happening. It just seems weird to most people when you're thinking from the outside in and saying, wait, you want me to bringing my kids in, and we're going to talk about, how stuff's going to get divided up, or if we should help grandkids or this or that. Like, it's like, well, if you have enough net worth that you have the capacity to help during your lifetime and help next generations, it's worth talking about, and then communicating effectively. The landmines I always see is when they don't communicate, and then, kids think they're going to they start borrowing money among siblings, and well, I'll get paid back out of the trust someday. But that's not in the documents. It's not the legal framework. It's not how it works. And, and then all of a sudden you have a sibling that passes away and the spouse gets remarried and the new spouse is saying, we're not paying that back. That's, there's just all these variables. But if you tie it back to the family values, and that's the glue that holds everyone together, and then the communication really happens, I think you're really onto something for a recipe for success there, Paul.
That plus the idea of responsibility. Like that's a very countercultural thing, because no one talks about responsibility. Everyone on the, mainstream media and everything is about, you have a, right to this and right, everything's about your right to express yourself, your right to, be whatever sexuality you want, or whatever the topic is. Nothing is, well, what's your responsibility to other people? What's your responsibility to your family, to your spouse? There's a right to get a divorce. Okay. Yes. Legally, there's a right to get a divorce, but when you entered into the marriage, what was your responsibility? And are you dealing with that? Are you being a responsible person? And so I remember a family growing up that was always kind of mysterious to me. So I grew up in Winona, Minnesota, and went to a private high school there. And there was this one family that everyone just kind of whispered about, like they didn't really know what the dad did. Like, he seemed like he just sat at home and watched his stocks. Like, what's up with that? He doesn't even have a job. Mm-hmm. And so which is fine. If you can live off, just watching your stocks, awesome. But what I remember mostly was the kids were kind of shadows of people. Like they were kind of shy. They were like not sure of themselves, lacked confidence, and it just seemed sad. Like there was something sad about them. Like the whole family seemed sad. Like I think that's one of those other things. So yes, you can have everything in place that you just talked about, and collectively talk about the money and deal with it as a group and all that stuff. But somehow there has to also be this idea that and your purpose in life is to be the best version of yourself that you can be. Mm-hmm. With the money or without the money, and the money can, hopefully help you with that. But if at any point it starts hindering that, that's a bad thing. I mean, that's hurting the whole purpose you're on this earth.
So a friend of mine always says, money's not good or bad. It's just neutral, right? So if your intentions are good, this tool can amplify your good intentions. If your intentions are bad, this tool can amplify, your intentions in the opposite direction. So money's not good or bad. It's just a tool. It's neutral, right?
Right.
But I think your values, and having those clearly defined probably really helps, ensure that the money is used to amplify for good, to whatever is important to your family, right? Everyone's got different values, but that's, it's all really insightful stuff. What a different conversation than most estate attorneys care to have, your approach to all of this and the way that you think about it is very unique, right? It's very different than let's set up the legal entity structures and you have the right documents and, all this. It's really, just more almost personalized and thought out, really starting with the end in mind, kind of from a longer time horizon, which is unique. So I appreciate that it's different.
I've never seen a family splinter apart or self-destruct because they had to pay tax. But I have seen that with because of other things, because of the lack of communication and trust, or the lack of common understanding, or common goals, or something, or a way to resolve differences.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Paul, if somebody needs your help, where can they find you?
So I came up with the longest possible email address. Here, I'll give my phone number first. That's easy.
Okay.
and you can put this in the show notes, I guess. But so 602-443-4888. And then the longest email address in the world is Paul, Paul, at Sudden, Sudden, Wealth, Wealth, protectionlaw.com.
Paul at suddenwealthprotectionlaw.com.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if somebody needs some help, it certainly sounds like you're an available resource to start getting some consultations and stuff. I imagine you can help people in a multitude of ways there. So,
well, yeah, I do have to say, you're one of the rare advisors who understands or even cares about this stuff. So that, like, just to kind of give you a flavor. So when I inherited the money, the best advice I had was get a financial advisor and do the risk analysis, and that's pretty much it. But no one talked about all the emotions that I was going through. That's where things get really tricky. So, I guess my what, I'll just say it. I don't know if it's a request or whatever, but just be open to building relationships with the next generation, or as much as you can. Try to encourage your own clients to get their kids involved, or kind of in the common conversation. I'm not sure how that works. That gets trickier, but just kind of mention it, because I think all we can do is try to make little small changes in the world and try to make the world a better place. And that's one way. And you have a great personality and can obviously connect with people on a deeper level than a lot of other advisors I've met over the years. So,
well, I appreciate the kind words, Paul. So, well, this has been fun. We'll have to do it again, and maybe talk a little bit more in depth about some of the cases and stuff that you've worked on over the years. I'm sure you have a lot of interesting stuff you've worked on, and have seen, and probably a lot of valuable experiences. And I imagine some that are almost funny. That's sometimes people forget. Sometimes the estate stuff gets a little funny almost, So
it sometimes in a dark way, but yes.
Yeah.